Jesus, what
Hello,
is
ladies and
happening?
gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me from Blasphemy Central, Sejohn.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I just, is this what we're gonna do to start the show now? Is we're gonna play like associative word games? Like, just, I don't even, oh man.
Is it because I said ants?
And then started recording, like, instantly.
Well, because you seem so confused, which means that, like, there's a video I need to send you so you'll get it. Actually, I'll share everybody. This came up about a month ago. I'll say it was about a month ago. I did my second loop of all the game exchanges in Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
which there are 7 in Connecticut. There are no other ones on the East Coast, but there are 7 in Connecticut. And they make this beautiful circle around Connecticut. And you actually see some beautiful sights if you go to all 7 game exchanges in one day.
Fantastic.
This is
Yes.
true. Like, Dale and I did this the first time on like a whim, but then like I went with Jeff, friend of the show, Jeff, and we did all these, and like 4 in, he started talking. Like, we talked about a lot of things. He like that was 10 hours basically discussing the whole James Gunn controversy.
Oh, okay.
Because it had just happened. It had happened like the night before.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we had like 10 hours to like really dig deep into what that meant in terms of like the right being able to like stir up the same sort of frenzy that happened with Roseanne. And it's this weird thing, right? Where like we set a precedent with what happened with Roseanne. So like it's unfortunate because what Roseanne did, unforgivable in a lot of ways.
Yes,
To a
yes.
parent company like that. But, Disney is the parent company of ABC, and they're the parent company of these Marvel films, right? So the second you see, one bad tweet can get your whole career destroyed, people can use that precedent that has been set to destroy someone else's career. And that's actually like one of the more dangerous things about the current political climate. Is like, it's one of those things where like it's difficult to fight monsters without becoming a monster yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's just politics in general, but yes, right now more than ever, it seems to be very prevalent.
Yes, and that's one of the things is that like, but the problem is that the monsters will use the tactics that the monster hunters devise to defeat them. Like, just because they're monsters doesn't mean they're not intelligent. But
Hmm.
back to the point at hand, because we were talking about the Marvel universe for so long, like 10 hours of discussing it, around the 4th game exchange, so that was about like 4 hours in, Jeff started like ham boning on himself and just saying ants. And I'm like, I don't, what are you, and he's like, oh, you didn't see that? Like, this is a real thing that they did to promote Ant-Man. And it's Michael Douglas and it's Paul Rudd, and they're just like playing their bodies and like making all sorts of noises, and then one of them will go ants,
What?
and
What?
they do this for like 45 minutes, and then Paul Rudd just goes Ant-Man, and then like it comes up Ant-Man in theaters soon. But this is like a for real Disney released this promo for one of the Marvel movies,
Oof.
and it's ridiculous.
What?
So that's
okay.
what I referenced because you had like made a noise. I'm like,
Jesus.
oh, it's time to reference this. So like, go look that up. I'll throw it up on one of our social media sites so you can
Cool.
see this thing that 100% really exists, and like it just must have been them like messing around backstage.
Well, I
That they
wonder if it was for like a type of promo for the Disney Channel specifically, like if it was if they've got like all of their casting from all of their shows and movies and stuff doing weird shit.
Perhaps. I've never seen that. I've never seen a Marvel movie promo on the Disney Channel. I saw a bunch of Solo ones.
Mm.
I liked Solo, and I'm going to keep saying it. But that's one of those things. And one of the reasons why I'm starting off this episode talking about the Jeff and ants and all that is that this coming Sunday, the 26th, Jeff and I will be competing as a team on Arcade Pit. So that should be fun.
Awesome,
We're
man.
probably going to say ants a couple of times because it's become a like inside joke between us. Um,
It's fantastic.
um, but yeah, so 10 p.m. next Sunday, we're gonna be on Arcade Pit.
You
So
dorks.
look, that should be interesting. I did it
Cool.
before, and I played my heart out, but we lost because one game gave the other team like 160 points. That was just too big a wall to. Actually, I say that was too big a wall to climb, but we ended up like tying them right before the final round because of how good I am at video games.
Oh,
So like
Devon.
humble brag, but but yeah, that's what I wanted to start with. And you gave me a wonderful welcome with I don't know how like what we were talking about before, but like you set me up to say ants.
Hey, man, we should start this show we got.
Aren't we did, right? This is 6 minutes
Yeah.
in, but I guess
Oh,
we should
really? You
start
recorded
it,
that?
Start it
Oh, we have
proper.
to talk. Oh, man. So, Devon,
Yeah, what up?
what's going on with you this week?
What's going on with me this week? What a mean thing to do. I don't I saw my first movie since Mission Impossible Fallout. So that was
Oh,
like a
man.
good 3 weeks without going to the movies.
Was it just so good? You were just like, why would I go back?
No, it was because MoviePass is continuing to shit the bed, which is the
Sorry,
nicest
Fallout.
way
I
to
tried to
say
throw
it.
you one, but
Fallout, you're a great movie. You should be nominated for an Oscar. Perhaps outstanding achievement in popular film.
oh god. Oh
No,
man.
it definitely will be. I don't see it not getting that Oscar nomination. But
Yeah.
no, but like we've been trying to see movies like every week, and it's just like no, I'm not going to pay a $7 surcharge for this thing that I pay $10 a month for. I'm
Yeah.
not going to pay almost 75% of the subscription cost to see a movie today.
So what got you back? What did you go see?
Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh, okay, cool.
And that's not what got me back. It's just that like we were fully like we had been like, all right, so we're not using MoviePass tonight. Like we had movie tickets and like all this other way that we were going to do it. We went on Wednesday, so it was cheap senior ticket night, so that my mom was covered. And then Dale and I have free movie tickets at the showcase that expire in September. Then like September's coming,
Yes, it is.
so we need to use those. But then like on a whim, I opened up MoviePass as we were heading to the theater, and Crazy Rich Asians was the only ticket available at the theater that we were going to.
Nice.
So, like, yeah, we're going to take advantage of it, right? Fuck you, MoviePass. It's
Yeah,
weird.
no,
I
no.
kind of feel there's this episode of Family Guy. It's the one where Chris feels that he's, like, overweight. So they go to Cleveland's, I guess, cousin's liposuction thing. Liposuction. And he's like, I'm going to sneak in there with the fat. Like, I'm going to convince the fat that I'm one of his buddies.
Yes.
And then I'm going to get him back. I'm going to take him back across enemy lines. I kind of feel like that with MoviePass. That, like, I've convinced MoviePass I'm its buddy. But, like, I'm sneaking out as many movies as I can
Yeah.
before it all crumbles to the ground.
Hey man, but that's fair. You paid for that stuff, and take advantage of it before it goes away. Because yeah, it's not like you haven't paid for your fair share of movies in your life, and not that you won't ever pay again. So like,
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And here's the thing. Even if I get only one movie a month out of them, that covers the subscription cost. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to cancel it right now
right?
because I just need to make sure I go to the movies once on MoviePass's dime. Every
Yeah,
month.
man. You just got to make sure that something real weird doesn't happen. A lot of the death throes of companies like this, some weird, shady stuff can start happening with like user information and things like that. So you just want to make sure you get out before any of that happens.
was always the plan with MoviePass, though. Their thing was going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to weaponize your information.
Yeah, but I
Thanks
mean,
for
even going so
using-
far as like double charging people in the last month and that sort of stuff can
Yes,
show up.
so
like,
I'm so on top of that. I've been on top of that since they double charged us like very early on.
yeah.
But I have to give MoviePass credit. This is going to end it, and we'll shift from something else. But MoviePass is doing a contest to fly you over to LA. Like it's like to celebrate 1 year of the $9.95 subscription, and part of the prize is 2-year like subscriptions to MoviePass. And it's like that's wishful thinking, MoviePass. That's what that is.
Oh man, yeah. All right, man. So what else is going on?
Let's see. Oh, I finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
Fantastic, excellent.
which is one of
Yeah,
those
now
things.
before the big shift over to NBC, right?
Yeah, an unpopular opinion, and I understand that it's an unpopular opinion. I would have been okay with it ending where it ended.
I actually don't know how unpopular that is. I mean, I feel that way too, and I know a few people that I mean, like with all the love in the world for that show, I think it's one of the greatest television shows that we've had on TV in years. And so like, I, it's not that I'm disappointed to see more. I just I don't know if I need more. So we'll see. You know,
Yeah,
maybe this will be one of those things that goes down in infamy. What do you call it? Scrubs season 8, right? And that sort of thing.
Scrubs season 9, which
9, yeah.
we all need to remember that was actually a spin-off school called Scrubs Med School. That they completely, their whole plan was Scrubs is over. This is our spin-off show of Scrubs.
Right.
And I like people seem to forget that. They just think that it's a season of Scrubs, and like for some reason that's how it's marketed after the fact.
I was gonna say that honestly, I think a lot of the reason people think that way nowadays is that it straight up comes out as like season 9. So
Yeah, that was stupid. Like, because now if you're watching syndication of Scrubs, like they show those like 13 episodes of the show.
you know what though? I bet you money wise, in order to get the few people that they did get from the old show, they had to do it that way and call it a new season, because if they called it a new show, then the contracts would be crazy.
That's very true. I mean, there's a lot of cameos though. Like Dorian doesn't show up except in 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And
I don't know, man.
But it's good. I like that. You know, this is a really unpopular opinion. I think that was better, that 9th season of Scrubs, than the last 2 seasons of Scrubs.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll get something really special with the Brooklyn Nine-Nine stuff too. You know, no matter what, I'm looking at it as it's going to be something different.
Yeah, I mean, the fact
a lot
that
like the later Community stuff.
Yeah, and the fact that it was less than 24 hours means that nobody working on Brooklyn Nine-Nine had gone off and taken another job. So it's not going to be like Andre Braugher is suddenly being played by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's going to be there.
Yeah, so we'll see how that one goes too. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but then you also have like Last Man Standing that's coming back after a year hiatus, and they couldn't get back like 4 of the actors.
Oh God!
And they're recasting
why even
them.
bother? Why even bother?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm stupid excited for more Last Man Standing. I currently have the finale episode because it's been taken off of like Netflix and everything. I have the finale episode like saved on the DVR so we can watch it and then immediately compare it to the new episodes.
Excellent. Fantastic. You can do that research for me then. Thanks.
Oh yeah, I'm going to do that research for everybody. I'm like the guy. I'm the Last Man Standing guy.
You know, the worst part about that sort of stuff too, though, is like I could have very happily had a good conversation about a show like Last Man Standing. You know, like I don't think that it was like inventive in any way. I don't think it was like going to be important in any real way, other than like, hey, look, Tim Allen's still working. But man, that dude has just ruined that show for me. Tim Allen has just ruined Tim Allen for me.
I don't know what you're referring to. I'll be honest with you.
Oh, he basically, when the show got canceled, spent a lot of time on Fox News talking about how he was canceled because it was a conservative show, which is actually ridiculous if you ever watch Last Man Standing. But he was pretty convinced the only reason he got canceled was because he was a conservative voice, and basically like stomped his feet a bunch, which is why it got picked up for by Fox. Is because they basically were like, this is a good thing. We're gonna lean into this conservative angle. So yeah, so like this whole thing is like revolves around a whole bunch of like Trump nonsense and all that sort of stuff that Tim Allen was doing for a couple of months after it got canceled the first time.
I don't want to be like I don't want to give him any like validation to that point, but I also don't think he's not wrong. I mean, we've talked about it before on this very show that like they were able to get back Roseanne, and I felt like ABC is like, well, we can have one conservative voice here. We can't have both of them. The network cannot survive that.
Yeah,
so
the thing that kills me though about that concept is that anybody that's ever watched an episode of Last Man Standing knows it's not a conservative slanted show.
It's the most bipartisan show that's out there, and that's
right.
actually the reason why I enjoy it. Is that yes, his character of Mike Baxter is super conservative, but it's almost like, and that people are not going to like this. It was sort of like a modernization of All in the Family.
Oh, I know that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think even Tim Allen himself has admitted that like that was always his like Archie Bunker was like definitely his goal with that character, right? Like, and that's the whole thing. That's my whole point about it. Is it's like it's not fair to what that show was actually trying to do, and I'm not even saying it was succeeding at it. You know, that's the other thing is this is giving me all these feelings about a show that I'm really lukewarm on.
I got you.
But like, it's just this weird thing that like it turned into this conservative win in a way that seems so ham-fisted and unnecessary, and it also makes me really nervous for the return because if that's what they're going to lean into, then it's not going to be that bipartisan show that's really fun to watch. It's not going to be King of the Hill. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the best things ever about King of the Hill was that it could be that comedy for the conservative that like as somebody that sees himself as more progressive, like I could still get into and appreciate and fall in love with those characters. And like, I don't know, it's stupid because like the Last Man Standing stuff, it's going to come back and I bet it's going to do really well with all of the Roseanne stuff that happened. I think it's going to garner a lot of attention, a lot of runoff attention from that. Plus, you know, you're going to have fans from the old stuff like you that are legitimately excited that it's coming back.
I'm also legitimately excited to see how much of a dumpster fire it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, like there is a morbid curiosity angle for me for sure.
Where like that was the only reason that I watched Roseanne, but this one is like I actually legitimately like. I was watching Last Man Standing a couple of nights ago.
Yeah,
like nothing was on, and I'm like, I'll just throw it on. This should be fun.
No, I mean, like it's a show within its first episode. It deals with the daughter wanting to play football, right? Like, which was like a big thing. Is there a military angle in the first episode? I can't remember.
The military angle comes later into it.
Later, yeah. But I mean, like, so yeah, like All in the Family is a perfect counter analog to it. Yeah, yeah. So shows coming back. That's gonna be real weird.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that's what's happening now. We're just living in a nostalgia bubble.
Yeah, well, I actually was kind of breaking out of that bubble this week.
I'd like to hear how.
Well, I don't know where to start with this. First of all, I went to I saw Meet the Slendermans this week.
What? Did you...
You know, the Slendermans, the family comedy out in theaters right now.
I just thought it was called Slenderman.
Yeah.
About the Slenderman family.
Yeah, about the Slenderman family, right? It's actually more like the Squid and the Whale. It's a really deep look at these people with no faces. No, I went to go see Slenderman this week. I've got a friend that's very into horror movies. That's what she writes about for her dissertation and stuff like that. Is she writes about all of this like really cool like female portrayals in scary movies and all that sort of shit, and it's really deep stuff. And so she's always interested whenever there's a new scary movie coming out, no matter, you know, how good, bad it might look or any of that. And honestly, she's also one of those people that for as much as she writes about movies, she's a lot like you. She's very much in her own little like zeitgeist. Like there's things that she just completely misses sometimes, and there's things that like she'll pick up on. So this Slender Man stuff starts to come out, and she knows all of this stuff about the lore, about the original photos and all of this stuff. And I was just like, yeah, see, my knowledge with the Slender Man stuff is really more with the video game side of things. And it completely blew her mind that there was this whole other side to Slender Man that is like video games and like all of this other weird stuff and like in videos on YouTube. Like she had known that there were people doing that kind of stuff, but to her it was always more about like reading about the creepypasta and the story being written and passed around and people adding to it and all this stuff. She hadn't ever considered this whole like side to it that for me, that is Slenderman. Like Slenderman grew from this like this story on the internet into, to me, a video game franchise. Like that's just how I think of that character. How much of it are you familiar with, man?
0%. I know that it's basically just like a boogeyman that like shows up in the pictures and stuff. Here's what I know about Slenderman. I saw a film called The Bye Bye Man last year.
Yes.
That was basically Slenderman.
So here's the thing about Slenderman. Slenderman is an amalgamation of a lot of different creatures throughout history that are all the same idea, like this tall character that seems to move out of time and space. We see it in the backs of photos from hundreds of years ago. How is it still alive? That sort of stuff. That's and that none of the stuff with Slender Man is new in any real way. The only thing that's really new is the characters that come along with it, which I think is why I'm so heavily leaning towards the video games stuff when I think about my knowledge of it, is because it's leaning really hard on Slender Man, and there's this thing that he does where he essentially can like hypnotize people to help him, so they become what are called quote unquote proxies. It's actually like a big word in the Slender Man community, and there's a huge Slender Man community. But essentially those are the kinds of people that go and do his bidding in the world and that sort of stuff. So like this is the things that are showing up in the movie and all this. And we were talking about like our knowledge of the Slender Man stuff. And so how this all started was back in like 2000, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that. It wasn't too long ago. Some dude entered a contest, a photo contest online of just like, hey, what's the creepiest photo that you can make? And he was just a really good photographer and a really good Photoshop guy. So he put together a series of photos of just this that he had found, quote unquote, in his research or taken in his research. And it always seemed to weirdly have this thing in the background. And that's all it was. Just the series of photos of just this thing photoshopped into a bunch of old black and white photos, right? Like that's how Slenderman started. And then from there, people took the story and just went nuts with it. So people started making their own photos, people started making videos, then slowly people started making video games, and there it goes. And Slenderman becomes this huge phenomenon, right? But so we went to go see the movie, and that's where I'm coming from. She's just coming from knowing this. We both sat down not knowing what to expect at all from this film, because the other thing is that I hadn't really seen previews for it. We always talk all the time about how I'm not really in a position to get like previews thrown at me all the time now. So I just knew it existed. I I, I don't I don't I don't
I'm
know what
floating
to
over here
say.
because I'm so excited for like you to say something about
I
Slender Man.
I don't I just I don't want to hate on a movie that clearly there was a lot of work put into it. It's not a good movie. It's just not. It's I don't I have to be honest up front about it. Like I don't, because I'm about to heap a bunch of praise on some specific things in it that I want to make sure that we're clear here. I understand that Slender Man is just doesn't come together, right? First of all, there is a ton of homage to a lot of like old Slender Man, like original Slender Man stuff, which they can do because this is something that very rarely for these types of like folklore horror stories, it only started in the last like 4 years, so there's not too much history there, right? But I think that also works against them in a lot of the movie, is that there's not enough meat on the bones of this story for them to really do much with. But like I said, because it's so scant, its history is so scant, they can actually do direct homages to the original photos, to some of the original videos that came out. I think they straight up use some of the original online videos that people created, which, I mean, if I was a YouTuber making like stupid monster videos for YouTube, that would blow my mind to see mine up on screen.
Would it blow your mind if you didn't get paid or credited for it?
I mean,
Just
considering
curious.
considering considering that a lot of these videos are 10-second clips of shadowy figures in the background that dudes probably did while they were high in their backyard one day, I don't think anybody's gonna like be like my art. You know what I mean? It's not.
I'm just
And that's
curious if it
and
was
for all
your
we know,
art, Siege.
well, and for all we know, like I said, they pay so much attention to this kind of stuff. I don't know whether or not they actually went and talked to these people to use these videos, or maybe they just completely rip them off. Maybe we'll find that out. But but there is very much a care given to that, right? There's a bunch of sound effects from the video games, for instance, that show up in the movie. A lot of his like look and ability is based on the stuff that came out in a lot of the video games. It's just it clearly cares about its source material, which is good for a horror movie. And then like the acting is so. The thing is, the big thing about Slender Man is he goes after kids, as like that's his mythology, is he goes after children. So like it is actually a movie about children getting taken and killed and all this stuff, and that's always really dark. It's got a very It style element to it in that way. There's the problem is that Slender Man, they made it PG-13. And I don't know how you feel about PG-13 horror movies. I go back and forth on them. I don't know.
I had this epiphany. I'm gonna say back in 2015, when I just saw a shit ton of movies in the theater. That was 365 movies in
Hmm.
365 days.
Yeah, yeah.
Where like ratings are such a relic of the past
Hmm.
because, but they're a relic of the past to me because a film's rating literally has no impact on whether or not I'm going to see a movie.
Or whether or not you could see a movie.
Right. Well, no. I mean, well, yes, it's because it doesn't affect whether I
Well,
can or cannot see it. It doesn't have any effect on whether I want to see it.
right.
Like they're like as a kid, oh that movie's rated
Yeah.
R. Ooh, I gotta go.
Exactly.
Like
And the first time you see an R-rated film, it could be the shittiest shit that ever shat, and you love it. You think it's the greatest movie you've ever seen
oh, you mean
because it's rated
Cuffs?
R.
You think that's why Cuffs is my favorite movie?
Bachelor
Sejohn.
Party for me. Bachelor Party is mine.
I saw Cuffs in the theater. I was 4 years old, and you want to talk about a movie that like shaped a young Devon? It's Cuffs.
That explains a lot.
It really does, right? It really does. But yeah, so I in a lot of ways I respect the idea of the PG-13 horror movie because you need to if it's done well. I guess I should like try to clarify cuz I mean I used to do 48-hour film festivals
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they would have this thing where they're like we're having a PG was the designation. We're having a PG section of films. If you think that your film will be able to fit into this, please let us know. And I always volunteered for that
Yeah.
because I felt like it was a greater challenge to make a PG film because you're not able to rely on like strong language
Yeah.
in your acting. Like you need to get across anger without just saying fuck 70 times.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
and you need
and
to, so it's ambitious to try to make a PG-13 horror movie, but I feel like what you're going to say is it's ambition that fails a lot of the time.
well, and I want to start out by saying that I also I know why they did it. They made a PG-13 Slender Man movie because in the evolution from, creepypasta to the video game, the audience that it picked up, because it's a really big thing for YouTubers to put out there. It's one of the first really big like game let's plays and all that sort of stuff that people would watch, and they love watching people play Slender Man 1,000 times. And so the audience for a lot of that stuff is 10-year-olds, 13-year-olds, like kids that are old enough to be able to get on the computer on their own and look up video game YouTube videos, and also young enough that that's all they do. Their entire lives revolve around going to school and watching Slender Man videos. And there are people out there that do that stuff. We know that to a tragic point, because there's cases right now that are being tried that are young kids that straight up have done some horrible stuff because of how much Slender Man stuff they've been watching. Yet parents keep actually like letting their kids get into this stuff. And I mean, like, there's no judgment here for me because, like, I hate the idea of stopping kids from experiencing content if it's something that is. If the rest of the people around them are doing, they're going to experience it anyway. It might as well be, under your watchful eye, right? And so to that point, went into the movie, and the only other people in the entire theater were two 10-year-olds and their dad. And I don't know if dad knew what he was getting into, but and I got worried at first because I didn't realize it was a PG-13 until that moment, because I was like, oh no, little kids. I hate it when little kids come to horror movies. And I looked at the ticket and I was just like, oh, all right. I guess it makes sense that they were the exact right age for this movie is essentially what I'm getting at, because like I'm watching this film, and if I was a little kid, there's a lot of really creepy, weird stuff happening. I don't care about the things like there's no art to this film whatsoever. There's no point. There's nothing behind any of it. The entire movie is just the most shallow excuse for a horror movie, for just putting like weird stuff on screen I've seen in a long time. And it's a shame because I think that actually like the design on this Slenderman stuff, like the literal crafting of all of it is actually really, really good. I don't know how much of it is CGI versus practical stuff, but there's clearly some really good practical stuff in a couple of moments. Like there's good stuff in it, but there's not nearly enough good stuff to justify the hour and 40 minutes I think the movie actually is. Like it's not worth it in any sense. And that's a real shame because I was just so intrigued by this idea of a horror story. My Rhode Island R's are coming out there. Um, being being born only in the last few years. That idea of new stuff being created, I mean, it's important. As somebody that loves, like, you know, scary stories and all that sort of stuff, I don't tend to fall too much into the horror fan movie base because there's just a lot of nonsense that comes out. It's really rare that somebody puts a lot of like heart and soul into making a scary movie. When they do, I want to acknowledge it. And I was kind of hoping that's what this was because this new wave horror needs that. They need an artist to come in and actually put some heart and soul behind one of these stories. And this just wasn't it, you know, like this is clearly just a bunch of people just doing a quick cash grab. You know, I almost wonder if as much as the audience for Slender Man is made up very largely of you know, preteens, if they would not be better served by making an R-rated film that those preteens then all see eventually, you know what I mean? Like they'll figure out a way. They'll rent it from, well, I was gonna say Blockbuster, but not there. But you know what I mean? Like they'll
buy a
Redbox
ticket
it.
for
They'll
Wild
Netflix.
Wild West and then go into Slenderman.
Well, that'll happen on the and that's the other thing is Slender Man. I don't think is the kind of movie that was ever going to survive on its opening weekend, which you know is the only measure for success nowadays in film, which is a shame because it very much is going to be the kind of it could have been the kind of movie that if it was well made would have survived on the tail end for just years afterwards because the other big thing about this movie that I was excited about was the idea of it solidifying some of the lore of Slender Man because Slender Man was created online and it's still so fresh and nobody feels like they own it. Even the dude that did the original photos says that he kind of has no time for the Slender Man stuff. Like he really loves that people have picked it up and ran with it, but he's like, I have a family and a job, and so I focus on that more than anything. And I think that's like the coolest attitude in the world to have about this thing that you created that is, I mean, essentially going to go down in history now as one of the big bads of like scary characters, you know. But anyway, yeah, nobody feels like they own it, so there's this it's constantly shifting and changing, right? So the movie was going to give us this opportunity. Film has this magic of like solidifying the lore for that moment, you know. And I'm not saying that movies always get it right. We always love to talk about how movies get it wrong, but at least it gives us that jumping off point. And I don't think Slender Man really truly has that yet. There's a couple of the video games that people love talking about as like their version of the canon of Slender Man. But other than that, there really isn't much yet because it's so new and it's still changing. And it'll be decades before we ever talk about Slender Man as like a specific figure. You know how people have their rules for zombies and vampires? We will eventually have our official rules for Slender Man. It's just not going to be anytime soon, you know?
Well, the thing that I was thinking, and this is as like, I know the name Slender Man, and that's pretty much where my knowledge stops. But when you're talking about, like, it's only been around for, like, 4 years, so it's such a scant history, the first thing that jumped into my head is, then this was a quick cash grab. This was not something that had care put behind it. This is Hollywood at its most cynical saying, people are talking about this subject, let's make a movie right now.
I definitely think that higher up that is true, and I think that's the problem. Is I think you had too many people higher up that just wanted the damn thing made, and not enough people below that care about it. Because, like I said, like there's some really interesting stuff in it. The dude that they got to actually play Slender Man is actually this dude Javier Bodet, who is famous for being 7 feet tall and extremely lanky. So like there's a lot of practical stuff with Slender Man because they were actually able to get a dude that pretty much fits the bill. Like so like there's really cool moments that they're then able to have with this creature, with this monster, because they actually have an actor that can play it, you know. So like clearly the casting director knew what she was doing, you know. The director did it okay in shaping the moments like visually, but like there's just nothing behind it. And I don't know, man. Do you have any other thoughts about Slender Man? Because it led me to something that I really want to talk about.
I don't really, so I'd like to, except for the fact that like curse you, because now I'm going to go see this movie that I have zero desire to see.
It really it goes nowhere. The ending is such a. I will say this: the last 40 minutes of it becomes a psychological horror film, and I was much more interested in the story at that point. But like I said, it never amounts to enough.
Which again,
So
that's
like,
why I give any PG-13 horror movie credit, because it has to deal with like your actual fear.
they
Like
get two F words too.
that can happen. That they've been a little lax on that
Yeah, well,
lately.
and the only reason I mention that in this moment right now is because we're also sitting in the middle of all the controversy with eighth grade.
I haven't
And
seen eighth grade yet. Please don't say anything about the
no, no,
controversy of eighth grade.
no. It's not. It's not about anything in the story or anything like that. It's receiving an R rating, and everybody's pissed because it
It's
really
important to
is.
see.
It's really important for kids to
Yeah.
see, and the reason it's receiving an R rating is swearing. Like up and down, everybody's just like the only reason this is getting this R rating is swearing, and that's ridiculous because like then you have a movie like Slenderman come out and get a PG-13, and they're allowed to say the F word as many times as it seems like they want it. So like whatever. Anyway,
But they still said it twice, and like that's always been like there are a lot of PG-13s. I can think of a
one
bunch
is
where,
usually the rule. Is
but I can think of ones recently where two has sort of become the norm.
Yeah, but like you were saying, the ratings thing is so archaic, and the whole rating system is a complete sham anyway. So like, it's really hard to like
But that's the
even
thing, though.
talk about this.
But as a parent, right? Like neither of us have children, as far as you know. I know I don't have children, but I don't know what you do with your Sejohn lifestyle.
Yeah.
You could be setting up franchises for all I know.
Mm.
But sorry, but but when I am a parent, if there is a film that I think would be important for my kid to see, I would ignore the rating system. It's
Well,
like when you have a kid, you suddenly become like, oh my god, I need to protect them from everything. But like,
Well, one of the things that you got to consider though is that there's a lot of places, more and more places that are straight up just not letting kids into R-rated films.
well, those places need to get shut down.
I
Those
mean,
places need to be.
it's basically the norm out here, man. Like they will not allow anyone under the age of like 10, I think, or something into R-rated films, and they claim that it's a policy to, and this may be true. I'm not trying to. They claim it's about making the movie a pleasurable experience for everyone else. They don't want your kid to freak out in the middle of this R-rated film, and you know what I mean. Like when a bunch of people that are clearly not people there with their kids, they claim that it's just like that sort of thing. Is they don't want any problem that way. They're not trying to stop you because they don't think your kid shouldn't see this movie. They're trying to stop you because other people don't want your kid in that theater.
That's fucking bullshit. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that's fucking bullshit. But like even you, when you walked into Slenderman and thought it was an R-rated movie and saw two 10-year-olds, you got your panties in a bit of a bunch. And like I'm not trying to say anything, but not
that I care about. Those kids can watch Slenderman. I don't care. I just don't want them in front of me watching Slenderman. Like I want to be able to react to this movie in a way that's not that. There are certain places where you expect to go to gain privacy, man. Right? It's like going to the bathroom and then finding out that like there's somebody else in there. There's a little bit of a letdown in that moment, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to kick that person out of the bathroom so that you can have your alone time, but there is that moment where you're just like, oh, okay, I guess we're bathroom buddies for the moment. It's that same thought of walking into a theater to a horror movie. The last thing I want to see, because this has happened to me before, is to go into a movie and have a kid freak out. Because like I've talked about this before on the show. When I went to go see the midnight premiere of Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween, somebody brought their little kids, like 3 of them, in like footy pajamas and gave them a blanket and had them sit in the chairs next to them and thinking they were going to sleep through this movie. And sure enough, 20 minutes in, they're all freaking out and they never did anything about it. I spent an hour of that movie listening to these little kids basically like absorb nightmare fuel. You know, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So like
I guess I've never experienced something like that. But the thing that I do, I go to movies that I try to see movies alone as often as possible.
Of course, yeah, man.
Like if I'm going to see Slenderman, it is next Saturday at like a 10 o'clock showing.
Right.
Because I don't want anyone else in there. And I also feel like if I were going with my kid, but also like 8th grade is not a good example of that. Like we're talking about horror movies. I'm just saying that like if a movie theater is going to say no, we don't allow kids in, that's not what that rating means. It means no children allowed without parental accompaniment.
Yep. I understand this. Then yeah, man.
Like that's what NC-17
but it's
means.
why
No fucking children under 17.
But that's why I have such an issue with the ratings thing, is because it is owned by the movie theater unions and all this sort of stuff. It is owned by the industry, and they use it as an excuse to do stuff like this, to tell people what movies they can and can't see, literally. To put a sign out there that says you cannot see this movie if you are under this age and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, so the R rating thing for 8th grade is a big controversy for a lot of people, because it is going to stop people from seeing that movie that movie is probably might be helpful for, geared towards. But yet something like Slenderman, this could get shown in a high school auditorium someday when it's a snow day and half the teachers didn't make it in. Slenderman can go on screen, but 8th grade can't. Like, that's insane to me. That's the world we live in. But it got me so Slenderman got me into such like this weird place, right? Because I clearly was having such a hard time with it because I didn't enjoy it, but I wanted it to be so good. And so I started trying to figure out what I could do to come out of that funk. And that's when I remembered that there is something else out there that is based on a creepypasta. I decided to binge the entire first season of Candle Cove yesterday, or Channel Zero, Candle Cove. Do you know anything about this one?
This is the one where people believe that this was a TV show that they saw. Like, first of all, I hate the term creepypasta. I'm gonna just say it. You've said it like 3 times this episode, and every time, like, I cringe and I grind my back molars.
I'm sorry,
because I remember when they were called fucking urban legends.
Well,
like I don't understand where, like, I feel like Watch Mojo came up with the term creepypasta, and that's only because it's the first place I ever heard it, and I'm just like, I'm so done with Watch Mojo, and I just hear it and I cringe. And it's nothing against you. I'm not mad at you, but I just need to say that, like, it's a term I don't fucking like.
You know the origins of the word?
No, I don't.
So it's repost is the idea. It's basically, it cannot be a creepypasta unless it is an internet thing. It has to be on the internet, and it has to be shareable. And basically, it's a meme essentially, but like a scary one. But it's basically repost, and it got turned into repasta because people, when they were quickly typing and were silly and kids are dumb, so everybody started calling them repastas, and that's what like a lot of internet stuff is called. So creepypasta specifically looks at scary stuff. So like there's a big difference between it and just an urban legend, because it's like urban legend is like the umbrella term for a lot of things. Creepypasta is specifically an urban legend created on the internet, and so it's an important word for us, as dumb as it is, because it's going to differentiate in the future like where these stories came from. It's going to be helpful in remembering that these are stories that only existed in the last like 15 years or 25 years at this point, because the internet hasn't been around that long. And so like there's stuff that we talk about that we have to make sure people like remember that there's something that is new. So like Slenderman is a very specific version of an urban legend, is because, like I was saying, there's a ton of different versions of the no-face figure, like tall, lanky figure coming out of the woods to kidnap children. Pied Piper is an example that they straight up use in the movie. That is an example of it in history, right? But the creepypasta version of that legend is specifically Slenderman.
Okay. I'm sorry I like kind of freaked out there, but it's just like I want you to know that. And I guess like I love etymology and I love like word origins and stuff, but like also now hearing that, I kind of hate the phrase more. I'm gonna just be honest with you.
I mean, it's basic slang, and you're old.
God, fuck. I already feel like I'm yelling at clouds because I wasn't happy with the finale of DuckTales on like a very small level, but it like talks to what you were just speaking about, where like what kids are into and what entertainment is, and like I hold it to this weird standard, and I know that I'm yelling at clouds. I understand that I'm yelling at clouds, but it just it felt bad.
It's fine, man. No, yell at all the clouds you want. You just got to be able to recognize when you're doing that versus, because that's the problem. Is here's the thing: you could be upset about anything you want in this world. You're allowed to be. We live in America. You have that right. The thing is, you got to be able to like identify where it's coming from and live with that. That's all.
Okay. But no, it's one of those phrases. It's because like the girl that they have on the Watch Mojo stuff who says creepy pasta. I just want to smack her in the face. Like the way that she
Yeah.
says it, I'm just like,
And it's a
ugh.
phrase and a concept born out of an annoying time in our pop culture, right? Like we're talking about like YouTube videos really when they first started to become big. I mean, like Slenderman really parallels a lot of the growth of the internet over the last 10 years specifically, with the way that kids are doing more, creating more content and sharing more together online and all this sort of stuff. And Slenderman is a really good example of that, right? So we want to make sure that we can focus on just that. So yeah, it's a stupid term, but it's a stupid term because it was born out of a stupid time. You know what I mean? Like there's all sorts of dumb YouTube slang out there now that is going to be part of the lexicon for forever now, you know? Snapchat, people throw around Snapchat as if that was a word that was it's two different words, people. All right. But so anyway, so I decided that I was going to look into this
Channel
other thing
Zero, yeah, which is
because
yeah.
yeah, because the whole idea being like this idea of this new wave scary story being done well, and I had heard good things about it. So I snagged the first episode Friday night. I had seen Slenderman not 2 hours before, right? And I was just like, I need to do this. I need to see if this is just is this just a dry well or what? And man, the first episode of Candle Cove got me hooked so quick that the next day binged through the last five, like the other 5 episodes. It's only 6 episodes long. It's so much better. It is such a much better example of what you can do with this kind of material. So Candle Cove, as you mentioned earlier, is this scary story that got passed around about an old TV show that all of these kids kind of like, well, they're adults now, but they're talking about how when they were kids, they kind of remember this show. And then the more they remember it, the weirder it gets, until eventually they start being able to make these connections with the show and like disappearances and then slowly murders and like all this other stuff that they start to like remember. And it becomes this really awesome dark story. And again, started out probably about 5 or 6 years ago online, got passed around, added to, and like changed in certain ways. New characters were added, all this sort of stuff. So it's still this amorphous thing that's out there, right? And Sci-Fi decided that it was going to cash in on two things at once. It was going to cash in on this whole new creepypasta thing that was going on the internet, and it was also going to cash in on the anthology series that everybody was doing that seemed to be doing really well for them. So Sci-Fi is like, we're going to create our own scary anthology series, you know? And you could very much be cynical about it and talk about it in those terms as like just another cash grab. But man, the work that went into this pays off so much. There is so much good work in the costuming. There's these characters from the puppet show that they have to create the puppet show. First of all, there wasn't an actual Candle Cove, obviously, which is the name of the TV show if I didn't mention. So there wasn't an actual Candle Cove show. So they have to create like small little tidbits of a Candle Cove episode, and it has to get weirder and weirder, right? And so the whole puppet aspect is phenomenal. But then the big thing that happens is it's a very again, psychological horror, which I think a lot of these creepypastas tend to be, because they are being shared as stories. Usually they get shared piecemeal. People put chapters out at a time or paragraphs out at a time. So like there's always a psychological aspect, simply because the nature of that works better on the page like that. So there's this whole aspect to Candle Cove where the main character starts seeing characters from the puppet show in real life and like huge, right? And so there's all this awesome work of these large puppets, these like what are called bread and circus puppets. They're just it's crazy. The costume work that goes into some of the stuff for just moments, you know. And what was really cool about it was that there wasn't enough of it for me. I wanted more. I loved it so much, and it looked so good and worked so well that I kept waiting for it to come back. And when it didn't, I was actually disappointed. Whereas like in Slenderman, he shows up in the first 20 minutes and you get a pretty decent look at him. And so like, I was like, oh, cool. Like, I guess this is a straight up monster movie. We're just going to see a lot of him. But no, they still play with the idea that he's like in shadows and stuff the rest of the movie. And I'm like, but you've already shown him to me. There's like the big reveal at the end when they show him. I was just like, oh, this is great. But I'm not interested anymore. Like I saw this an hour ago. So like there's no like there's no hook to keep to want more of him. I mean, he's just a dude in a black suit with no face, which is horrifying, don't get me wrong, but like you show that to me once and then like don't act like it's like a big reveal at the end of the movie. Whereas with Candle Cove, they piece it out a little bit over the series, and it's just, oh god, it's so creepy every time they do it, right? And then on top of that, they build this really, really, really good story around it, clearly influenced by things like Stephen King. And that's the other thing, is other influences besides just the story itself. Like, they're going out there and looking at things like some really good psychological thrillers and some really good visual stuff that's happening. I mean, clearly being influenced by uh, Stanley Kubrick and all that sort of stuff in some hallway scenes. It was so nice to be able to see that, see the care that went into that, and see the way that it worked, and know that these kinds of stories actually have some legs, you know? It's a shame, because I wonder what Slenderman would have been like if it had been like an MTV show, you know, like Teen Wolf or Scream, you know. I bet you it would have done really well in that specific arena, because it would have had time to actually be a show, to actually flesh out characters and be a world. I mean, and at the same time they'd be hitting their key audience of that age demographic, you know.
Yeah, I feel you. I guess I love folklore and scary stories. Like, scary stories to tell in the dark was given to me when I was 8 years old, and I devoured all three of those books. And like, by devoured all three of those books, I mean the best part about those books is everybody remembers like the scary pictures and the stories, but then
Right.
there are like indexes and appendices to all of them, where Alvin Schwartz talks about like what inspired the stories and the care and research he did into each one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like, that's the thing where I'm like, oh, this stuff is awesome. And
Yeah.
like, reading the original Brothers Grimm stuff and seeing how that has like existed and evolved, like, it's something that I really enjoy. I guess, like, at the end of the day, what I need to admit is I'm still afraid of the internet. Or it's not that I'm still afraid of the internet, but like, I was fearful of the internet for so long, and I feel like such an idiot saying that. But
No,
it's
man.
just like one of those things where all of the stories you heard from the internet were like identity theft, or like all this stuff where it's like, don't share your real stuff on the internet because that's how you get taken. And Liam Neeson
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
exist yet when that was out
yeah.
there. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so it
Yeah.
was one of those things where like I'm like super guarded on the internet. Like, I'm so guarded that like Waze, like I use the application Waze, but my home address is just a well-known public location near my house,
Yeah.
because like I don't want someone to know where my home is if they like access my Waze app. Like,
Well, and you know, and I'm not going to say it's not a legitimate fear, though, man. Like, there's definitely a reason to be respectful of the power of the internet. Like, there's some crazy, scary, fucked up things that can happen because of the world that we now live in. But I mean, like, new technology is creating new, you know, risks and dangers, as always a thing,
that's
right?
always part of it, and I get it. But I guess so. Like, what I don't understand is like taking something that already has like some inherent fear in it and using it to spread more fear is something I don't get. And also, like, a lot of this stuff, and you know, it's groupthink,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I've never been a huge fan of that, just in general.
Consider this though, man. The idea of to both of your points, the idea of using a scary environment to tell a scary story goes back to the
Oh, I
cavemen.
got a flashlight under my face. Yeah, I got you.
I'm standing around a fire. Like, we don't tell scary stories until it's dark for a reason, right? And the same can be said about the internet. We like these kinds of stories couldn't exist, and the reason that Candle Cove works as well as it does as a story, like going back to its just baseline creepypasta internet origins, the reason that it worked as well as it did was not that it was like a dude like Stephen King giving me that one unreliable narrator telling me how this thing happened to him. You know, that kind of stuff doesn't scare us anymore. But what it was released as was a conversation between people on a message board, just talking like friends talks, you know, and then suddenly one of them just bringing up like a Candle Cove thing, like, hey, my kid was telling me that they were watching the show the other day, and it turns out the Candle Cove is back. And then like another friend is just like, oh man, I'm glad they're redoing it. I remember when I was a kid, we used to watch it all the time. And then it slowly evolves, and it's not, and so it's this idea that people can come in and change it. And on top of that, because the internet is as amazing and mind-blowing as it is, people can literally actually add to the story. So then other people can jump in, and it becomes this thing that feels so real because of the idea that it's just a well conceived like story. Like the way that it was originally brought to the internet is the reason it hit as well as it did, and it's just beautifully done. So translating that to the screen, like there has to be some thought put behind it, and there clearly was with this sci-fi show. It's not perfect, there's a couple of draggy moments. There's some things where bizarre stuff happens just for the sake of being bizarre. There's an entire character that I still don't understand the point of, but it was like a cool costume, so like good on them for like having that for weird moments. But a lot of the problems that I have with it, I also had with American Horror Story. So I wonder if it's just that I'm just not, I just have some inherent issues with this type of programming. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. But that being said, man, you should check out this show. And then think about the fact that it was something that was created on the internet by people all just coming together and doing this sort of thing. But I mean, like the internet is the modern day campfire for this sort of stuff, and that's why this stuff is taking off like it does. And then it turns into these things. It turns into these video games. It turns into. I think Candle Cove suits itself more to a television program as well because of the whole idea that it also plays off of our fear of the television, right? Like and all that sort of stuff. That channel at the end of the dial, It's just the ways in which we share stories have changed because of the internet, and we need to start considering that in all of our mediums. Like it's why we started to see things over the last couple of years. There was the Unfriended movies where they were like made all just on a computer screen. There was an episode of Modern Family that I think actually won a couple of awards because the entire thing was done on the computer screen. Now there's a John Cho like Taken style. Well, I don't think it's Taken because I don't think there's an action element, but there's this whole like Missing Child movie that's coming out, and it's just John Cho looking into a webcam for 2 hours, which I'll watch that dude read the phone book, so I'm totally into that. That being an interesting new way that we tell stories now too, right? Like we have to adopt these technologies into these stories now. And I was worried after seeing Slenderman. I think that's what it was. I think I was worried after seeing Slenderman that we had kind of hit a point where because the source material was so watered down, was so shared, it was watered down, right? And I was worried that meant that we were not creating good, deep like folklore anymore. But you can't really tell that in the moment anyway, right? But then I saw something like Candle Cove, and I was like reassured. I was like, all right, we have not completely lost our creativity. We have not completely lost this edge. And so like we can still do this stuff in the internet age. And so like if you're feeling this way, go check out Candle Cove and see what this kind of internet storytelling can actually like give birth to.
I have never felt more old than I feel right now. And I'm gonna own that, because that's literally what I've been thinking as you've stood on your soapbox and beautifully, eloquently made your point about this stuff. But I just feel so old, and it's not just you. It's like this whole system where, like, first of all, I'm kind of mad that you didn't get to watch DuckTales yet. I'm gonna be honest with you, because
it might happen.
No, and that's fine. And when it does, like, we'll talk about it. But like, I struggled to get to sleep last night, as like I was wrestling with things that occurred in the finale of DuckTales from like a storytelling perspective. And then like, I mean, I guess we can tease it here. Like our very special episode is going to be about Rise of the TMNT, right? We're going to do another commentary episode. And I'm excited about that. But like, I've watched that first episode, and it says to me that we're completely changing how children's animation is going to be constructed and consumed. And I don't love that. Like, I don't love the changes that are coming to that. So I'm also feeling like the walls are closing in a little bit with that one too. Like, it's just, and then like you go off on this stuff where like I've stayed away from it because I don't know, like it's never something that I was ever a part of. When it came to the internet. The internet for me was looking up video game like secrets and about games I had played a million times, and like learning something new. And that, like, I guess the closest I ever got to a repost was that like Luigi was in Super Mario 64, and like I wasted a whole weekend trying to unlock him, and then I'm like, I'm done with this portion of the internet. So I never saw like any creepypasta. Now you got me saying the word. Which honestly, at the end of by the end of this episode, it felt like you were deriving pleasure every time you said it.
Well, part of it for me is I understand that it's a stupid word, but I have said it so much in my life that it no longer matters. So finding out that you have not had the chance to do that yet, I'm going to say it as much as I can so that you just become numb to it.
You gotta just keep twisting the knife. Is what it's what it feels like every time. Like this fucking bastard.
And eventually it'll feel better, I promise.
Jesus. But yeah, it's just one of those. It's not something I've experienced, and so like I don't know if it's the lack of experience that makes me feel like I don't really know anything about this, or just the fact that I don't take issue with it. It's just like I don't love it. I mean, like last thing I'll talk about here is like Netflix released Disenchantment. Have you gotten a chance to see any of it yet?
Yeah, watch the first 2 episodes.
Okay, so I watched the first episode. It's slow, and it's not as kinetic as I was hoping it would be. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think that's because they're trying to do something different, something that they've never done before. I think they are trying to tell a season-long story, in a way that they never have before with Futurama or Simpsons. I think that that's part of why it feels so slow, is because it is legitimately just a prologue to the actual story. Because get back to me after you watch episode 2, because I felt that way. I felt that way at first as well, but then when I watched episode 2 and saw how things were going to progress, I realized they have to go slow, because you got to think of it this way. It's as if the guys that did Futurama made Game of Thrones. So like there's a lot of characters they've got to introduce and world building they've got to do before they can actually get to the story of what the show is going to be, but they're getting there. It feels like they're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the first episode, like, it did feel, because everything had come together, like, it really triggered that part of my mind that remembers the end of Futurama's first episode, where, like, the hounds are at the door, and they don't know what they're going to do, and you have your, like, trio of characters, and, and
I'm a delivery boy.
Yeah, no, not that part. It got to the I'm the delivery boy part. It ended at them being in the hall of like criminals or vice president's heads. They're in the vice president's head thing, and they have to like get away. Like
Right.
That's what it felt like, and I'm like, oh, okay, so they can do it. I guess where I'm more complaining though is in like the background animation and stuff. Like the story itself, I know is going to be a little bit more deliberate because it's going to be season long, and like that's one of my issues with Netflix shows anyway, is because like they take their time in a way that I don't get. Like there's a reason that I like BoJack Horseman, because even though it tells like a season long story, each episode can be consumed on its own and enjoyed.
Yeah, it's a little bit more traditional, which is one of the reasons it's going to be the first Netflix show ever picked up for syndication on cable television.
Yeah, no, Comedy Central series premiere, which I think is hilarious for a show that's been around for like 6 years.
Yeah, I know.
But it's one of those things where like this one, like even like in background shots or like pans, it just doesn't feel like that same sort of life that was present in The Simpsons or in Futurama.
Oh, see, but I think that part of that might be, I think that some of the background stuff is gorgeous with the watercolors and stuff. So I wonder if they opted for showing off more of that rather than filling it with characters. The other thing is you got to remember that as much as Netflix is like a powerhouse nowadays and all this sort of stuff, there's no way that he's got the same backing there that he has on things like The Simpsons and he had on Futurama, right?
So it's like, right there, it's budgetary constraints. Like you can see that, especially if they're going to do it in the medium that they're doing it. Because like I also again want to point to like BoJack Horseman, because it's really the only other animated Netflix show that I've consumed. Right, like I don't know if they even have other ones. They do, right? Like Richie Rich,
Cupcake and
Turbo
Dino
stuff. I don't know.
Cupcake and Dino. You gotta do some Cupcake and Dino. If you liked, okay, it's not the same as Apple and Onion, but like it hits that same.
Can we talk about the fact that like Cartoon
vein.
Network has completely scrubbed Apple and Onion from existence?
Yeah.
Like it's really weird to me.
Oh, that's the other thing about the Candle Cove thing I forgot to mention. Part of me trying to track it down was so creepy that added to watching it because of it being about this idea of this TV show that didn't ever actually exist. For some reason, the first season of Channel Zero is like impossible to get a hold of without paying an arm and a leg for. You can pay for it by episode with Amazon is probably your best bet. But I had to go into some deep annals of the internet.
I believe it's annals. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where, like, I'm still going to watch Disenchantment, but I was feeling a little disenfranchised by the first episode.
Yeah, and I've heard that from a lot of people that it's just not, it doesn't have the life that some of these other shows do.
Castlevania, right?
Yeah,
like
man.
okay,
Yeah.
I get it. I understood. Like, everybody was upset that they did 4 episodes. So I'm like, I don't care that they did 4 episodes. Every one of these felt so full of life and action and kineticism
Yeah.
that, like, it makes me wonder. It's like, well, like, is less is more if your budget is going to be a problem?
Well, and that's another great thing about the Channel Zero stuff is it's only 6 episodes a season. Like Sci-Fi is making sure that they keep it short and sweet, which allows them to do things like pay for the great costume work and design work and production style and everything that they get from that show is. But yeah, you look at something like Disenchantment and you can definitely see that it is not. It's weird because in some ways it's not as big as something like Futurama. The world doesn't feel as big as Futurama yet, but I've only watched a couple of episodes. But the other thing is that it does feel bigger than those than Futurama or Simpsons, because I do feel like they're really trying to tell like I said, a Game of Thrones style story with like all of these different character stories going along, and that we're going to see kind of weave in and out of each other. It should be pretty cool.
Great, because I love Game of Thrones.
Well, but
Oh boy.
it'll be the Futurama guys telling those
Yeah,
stories.
that's true. I know. I'm just being a jerk. But yeah,
it gets dark, man.
I
Like,
imagine
there's some
so. Let's
good-
stop. I'm excited to watch more. But
there's
I
some
just
dark
wanted
jokes.
to say I'm fine with that. I love dark comedy. What was I gonna? I had something else. You brought up the Candy Cove chicken wing show.
The Candy Cove chicken wings. Come on down.
No, about
Herbs and spices.
well,
And
sure.
your soul.
So to wrap it all together, and that's sort of like where I'm nervous about Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a lot of these shows go on longer than they have to. Like Big Bang Theory has begun cannibalizing itself because it has nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And it's still like this huge moneymaker. Like you look at How I Met Your Mother, and like if it had just been 1 season, it would have been great. Like it would have. If they've said that if they hadn't gotten picked up for the 2nd season, he would have wound up with Victoria. And like you watch that 1st season, it's like I'm perfectly happy with that. Like that's a perfectly happy ending. And then I'm not sitting there 9 years later like, oh, that's cool that you introduced this woman only to kill her. Like, way to go! And it's one of those things where like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, as much as I love it. And like again, I hadn't missed the train because I'd seen Halloween episodes, and like there's a lot of like season 2 that I just happened to watch, I guess, because it was on and I didn't have anything else to do. But I almost am nervous now that it's going to get another season, that like that season is going to like taint it in some way, and like even the fact that it's going to be a mid-season replacement, like it's not starting, so we're probably not going to get a 6th Halloween. Like we're not going to get like that show's bread and butter is it's Halloween, it's Thanksgiving, and it's Christmas episodes. And we're probably not going to get those.
Yeah, we might not, or they might pull something weird out of their ass.
Or they're going to do
know.
it and just be like, fuck it, we're not releasing them. What I'm really hoping for is that there's like Brooklyn Nine-Nine like Halloween episode. Like they do it as a special. And like, but then at the same time, I'm like, that would also cheapen and change the show. And the only reason I'm thinking of that is because in my memories today was Superstore doing their Olympic tie-in episode.
Oh my
That
god,
was a
which is out of time and space, you mean?
Yeah,
completely
like-
out of time and space.
So like this just never happened, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
that's my exact post is. So nothing about this Olympic episode is canon, right?
Isn't there like something that happens in it though that they do end up
introduced the
referencing at
fact
some
that
point?
they introduced the fact that I can't think of his name. Nico Santos' character. What is his name in it? He started with the guy.
Oh man,
Oh my god, I've
I
lost
don't
all
know.
my
I
Superstore
can't
knowledge.
remember the character's name. Yeah.
Who's the main guy? Who's the main character?
Jonah.
Jonah. He started with Jonah. And they reveal in the Olympic episode that he's not a citizen, that he doesn't have that.
That's right.
And that came back as a huge storyline. And it's just like he was like, "Don't you remember? I'm not legal." And I'm like, "No one remembers that because it happened in the goddamn Olympic episode." Mateo is his name.
Mateo, yes.
And well, no, he just played in Crazy Rich Asians, which was great. Go see Crazy Rich Asians. The only reason I didn't talk more about it is because I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Go see it. It's an important film in a lot of ways.
Is it good?
Oh, it's great. It's very, very good. Like, you talk about, like, beautiful setting and scenery, and just the acting is on point. The story is very good. Like, I just felt so much during that film. And, like, in addition to that is the fact that it's, like, the first all-Asian cast in forever.
Yeah.
Like, 25 years, I think they said. So, go see Crazy Rich Asians. I guess I'm not going to give Channel Zero a try. Especially once you tell me that it's, like, difficult to find. I'm probably not going to put the effort in. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, that's fine. I think anybody out there that really is kind of looking for this sort of stuff, though, you will not be disappointed in that. You know, if you know what you're getting into, Slenderman might even be worth a watch. But
I'll go see Slenderman.
I won't recommend it.
That takes me nothing. And maybe I get to like squeeze it out of the Movie Pass teat. So
there you go.
We'll see. It becomes a challenge now. But until then, I've been Devon Decker. If you want to yell at me about the fact that I'm an old man or offer me like cheap prescription medication that will not be covered by Medicare, you can find me on Twitter at Devon D. Decker.
And if you want to send me more creepy pastas, you can send them to @Siege versus the World.
Will end it. End my pain.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.